We have a study sheet for you tonight. If you didn't get one, we have plenty. If you'll just raise your hand, I got some boys back here that will get one right to you. Just raise your hand. Don't be embarrassed. Well, be embarrassed. Just raise your hand. Everybody got one? Great. One of the clearest ways of teaching is by way of example. There are many different ways you can teach various disciplines. But one of the clearest and one of the easiest to remember is an example. You can be taught a precept or a concept, but then when you can see an example of that concept, then it becomes clear. Then you say, oh, I got it. Examples. The master teacher, Jesus Christ, used so many different examples because he was such a wonderful teacher. And as we think about trusting in God, as many people who will hear my voice are going through afflictions, we need to think about examples. They make it more clear. What does it mean to trust in God? What's it mean to have confidence in God, to depend on God? One of the greatest examples in the Bible of one who depended on God and trusted in God is King David. And so what I've done, I've listed on this sheet for you many of the things that he wrote that shows us a picture of his heart, that shows us what kind of man he was, and what kind of religion he possessed, and what kind of trust he had in God. You remember 1 Samuel 13:14. Only man in the Bible, it says a man after God's own heart. So much we can learn from David. The first thing I want us to look at is 2 Samuel chapter 23, chapter 22, verse 1 through 3. In this particular context, David had been delivered from King Saul. You remember King Saul wanted David dead. Many of his enemies wanted him destroyed. They pursued him relentlessly for years, and he had done nothing wrong. Nothing. Jealousy, envy, arrogance led to these years and years of adversity. In this particular context, David had been delivered from his enemies. In particular, notice verse 1, King Saul. As a result of that deliverance, David was called the sweet psalmist of Israel. He was a poet and a songwriter. And many of his talents are shown to us in the book of Psalms. But not only in the book of Psalms. This is a song that he wrote in 2 Samuel chapter 22. And notice what he said in this beautiful passage after being delivered from Saul. He said, "In him I will trust." That's God. I can't imagine spending the night in conditions that David had to go through. I can't imagine the horrible atrocities that Saul put David through. And yet, here he says, instead of complaining and murmuring, what have I done to deserve this? He said, I trust in God. I trust in him. 2 Samuel 22, 1 through 3. Then I want us to look at some of the Psalms that David wrote. Psalm chapter 5, verse 11. If you have your Bible, or here you can just look on this sheet. You can hear it and see it at the same time, which helps you to remember. Psalm 5, verse 11. Let all those that put their trust in Him rejoice. What does that tell you? Trusting in God brings a life of joy. Not trusting in God brings bitterness and unhappiness. Trusting in God brings joy. Reminds us in the New Testament of Philippians 4, verse 4. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say, rejoice. Reminds us of 1 Peter 1 and verse number 8. Though we have never seen Jesus, we rejoice with joy that is unspeakable and full of glory. 1 Peter 1, verse number 8. Why? Because we trust in God. Our trust is not in our money. It's not in who we are. It's not how tough we are. Our trust is in the God of the universe, the ultimate in the universe. Thus, we have a life of joy. Psalm 11. Psalm 11, verse 1. In the Lord I put my trust. Where do you put your trust? It's somewhere. Is it in yourself? Is it in your bank account? Is it in your retirement? Where do you have your trust? His trust was in God. And that's why his life was so beautiful. And that's why he lived such a beautiful life. Psalm 13:5. I have trusted in thy mercy. Remember this morning we talked about how trusting in God, what does that mean? It means trust in his mercy, in his compassion. David says, I trust in his mercy. Psalm 16:1. Preserve me, O God, for in thee do I put my trust. Protect me, be with me, deliver me from all those who hate me and all those who would destroy my life and all those who would bring me down with slander and lies and hypocrisy and even sometimes murder. David said, God, protect me. And in thee I put my trust. Psalm 17, verse number 17. Thou savest by thy right hand them that trust in thee. All through the Bible, the idea of someone, the right hand, or someone sitting on the right hand, that's the place of power. Jesus was raised to sit on the right hand of God. Metaphorical, of course, but the thought is there. A place of power. The right hand is a place of power. And David said, with your right hand, you will deliver those who trust in you. That's what David believed. Psalm 18:2. The Lord is my fortress, protection, deliverance. He is my fortress. He is my deliverer. He is my God. He is my strength, in whom I put my trust. Psalm 18:2. All these beautiful things describe how he looked upon God. How do you look upon God? How do you look upon God? Maybe sometimes we look on God with too narrow a perception. This is how he looked on his God, his strength, his fortress, his deliverer. And he said, that's whom I put my trust in. And that's why David lived a beautiful life. and was called a man after God's own heart. Psalm chapter 20, verse number 7. Some trust in chariots. That was the war machine of the day. Some trust in horses. But look what he said. But we will remember the name of the Lord our God. Their trust was not in their army. Psalm 20, verse 7. People who gas little children with poisonous gases and who kill innocent women and children, they have much more to fear than the United States of America. They better fear the USA. But they have something a lot more terrible to fear than us, and that is Judgment Day. Can you imagine all those little innocent children dying from poisonous gases? Can you imagine someone so evil and so depraved, so ungodly, they don't even have the right to live on this earth? One day they're going to stand before God. Some trust in the military. He said, we remember the name of our Lord, the Lord our God. 20 verse 7. 23 verse 4. This is the best known psalm of David, and probably better than any other of his poems. It shows his trust in his God. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Psalm 23, verse 4. That's given comfort to God's people for generations. I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil. 23, 4. 25, 2. It's like he's exclaiming this with such joy. Oh my God, I trust in thee. Not just believing a certain doctrinal matter or matters. His whole life was delivered over to God, and he trusted that God would do what was right with his life. Do you trust in God? Do you trust that he'll do what's right with your life? Whatever happens in your life, do you believe God is going to be with you? And whatever happens, it'll be for the best? Somebody said, oh, H.D., I feel so sorry for you. You have this incurable disease. Let me tell you something. This can be the best thing that ever happened to me. Because I needed to be put down a notch or two. And I want to tell you right now, none of you could have done it. It took God. And if that helps me to go to heaven, if that prepares me for heaven, every moment of suffering is worth it. I consider all the sufferings of this present time are not comparable to the glory that'll be revealed in us. So don't feel sorry for me. It's a wonderful thing. If I can be closer to God, if I can be knocked down a few notches, that's what I needed. And that's probably all that would have done it. It wouldn't have been anything you could have said or done. It took the God of the universe. And if that helps me go to heaven, then God is to be praised. We must trust him in all things, not just in good things. Boy, isn't it easy to trust him when things are going good? Oh, I trust in God. I got this big retirement. I don't have nothing to worry about. I worked hard all my life. It's easy to trust him when things are going good. What about when things are going horrible? What about when everything is upside down? What about when your whole life is in turmoil? That's when it's hard to trust Him. But that's when David trusted Him. Psalm 28, verse 7. My heart trusted in Him, and I am helped. Therefore my heart greatly rejoices. 28:7. Psalm 28:7. I am helped by God. I trust in Him. My heart not rejoices. He said my heart greatly rejoices. Psalm 31, verse number 1. In Thee, O Lord, do I put my trust. Not in a president, not in a candidate, not in a country, in God. Is that where your trust is? In Thee, O God, do I put my trust. All of us put our trust somewhere. Is it in the right place? In Thee, O God, do I put my trust. May we be like David. And then I love this Psalm 31:13 and 14. I've heard the slander of many. You heard people slander other people? Pull them down. Say things that are ugly, mean, unloving, unkind, unmerciful, in the name of being bold and sound. Look what he said. I've heard the slander of many. Fear is on every side. Imagine that. People were slandering David. He heard that. He heard those horrible things. And these were God's people doing it. His own brethren. He heard them slandering. Fear is on every side. But look what he said. They took counsel against me. All these slanderers got together and they talked and they slandered. How are we going to pull this man down? How are we going to hurt this man? How are we going to give him what he deserves? They took counsel against me. But look what David said. He could have had them killed. He could have demanded their execution. His own son led a rebellion against him and would have killed his own father. But look what he said in the midst of all this. But I trusted in Thee. So what do we do when people slander us? When we are fearful? When people get around and talk about how to bring us down? What do? We go slander them? We try to hurt them? Well, I'll show them. They won't bring me down. I'll bring them down. Is that what it said? No. David said in the midst of all that, in the midst of all that ugliness and arrogance, he said, I put my trust in the Lord. What a wonderful man he was. 32:10. Many sorrows shall be to the wicked. We know that. But he that trusts in the Lord, mercy shall compass him round about. Psalm 32, verse 10. Many people who live in sin have horrible consequences to pay, even after they repent. But those who place their trust in the mercy and love of God, they'll be delivered. Beautiful song. Chapter 34, verse 8. Blessed is the man that trusts in Him. You know the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit. There's the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the peacemakers. They'll be called the children of God. You know those beautiful Beatitudes in Matthew 5, 1 and following. Well, here's a Beatitude in the Psalm. Blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord. Psalm 34, verse 8. None of them that trust in him will be desolate. He will not forsake a one, 34:22. I love Psalm 37, verse 7. Isn't this a beautiful psalm? How excellent is thy loving kindness. We mentioned this morning. If we mention it every morning, it wouldn't be too much. If every morning we got up and said this in the pulpit, it wouldn't be too much. How excellent is thy loving kindness, O God. Therefore, the children of men place their trust under the shadow of his wings. Isn't that a beautiful metaphor? 36:7. 37:3. Trust in the Lord. Do what's good. Trust in God and do good to people. Speak kind to people. Be merciful to people. Be compassionate. You don't have to be mean and ugly and cruel and thoughtless and inconsiderate and just try to pull people down. Trust in God and do what's good. Romans 12:9. Detest what is evil. Cleave to what is good. Romans chapter 12, verse 9. That means be glued to goodness, good talk, good behavior. You know, we could really help each other here if we wanted to. All of us go through hard times. We could really help each other. We could be a congregation that really is concerned about each other, and many of you are. But we could all be that way if we wanted to. Some of us don't want to. Trust in God. Do what's good. Beautiful Psalm 37:3. 37:5. Commit your way unto the Lord and trust in him. Make a decision. My life is committed not to myself, not to my family, not to my country. My number one commitment is to God. Commit yourself to God and trust in him. 37:5. 37:7. Trust must be patient. We're not a very patient people. We're not very patient. We're not very patient with one another. We're not very patient with God. We're not very patient with anyone or anything. Trust in God must be patient. God doesn't work on your little ridiculous timetable. He doesn't do things the way you want them done at the time you want them done. Because he does them right. And we must be patient and wait on the Lord and be patient. 37:40. God will save his people. Why? Why is he going to save them? Because they're so wonderful. No. Because they trust in him. God will save us if we trust in him. Psalm 40, verse 3. Have you thought about this? Our influence, if we really trust in God, that can influence other people to trust in God. The more we trust in God in our lives, the more that influence can bleed to other people's lives and cause them to want to trust in God. 43. 56:3. You ever been afraid? I really thought one time, several years ago, when my half-brother took a .357 Magnum pistol and pointed it at me and reminded me all the ugly things I'd done to him through our growing up period. He was right about that. I was the meanest little kid. Y'all think your kids are mean? You don't even know what mean is. I was the meanest little devil you could imagine. And so when we grew up one time, he took me out to the river and he pointed a .357 Magnum right at my face. He said, "You remember all those things you did to me?" I was so scared I couldn't even answer. I thought, this is it. My children won't have a daddy with a head. Then he puts it up. What does this say? When I was afraid, I trust in thee. In times of fear, in times of anxiety, that's when we need to trust in God. Not when things are going good, but in times of fear and anxiety and affliction. That shows our true trust. In God I have put my trust. I will not be afraid what man shall do to me. 56:11. Isn't that a beautiful passage? I don't care what man does to me. I don't fear man because my trust is in God. I remember a man in a wheelchair named Cliff Morton. He's the only man I've ever really known well that didn't fear anyone on this earth. He feared God. And isn't this what this is saying? We put our trust in God. We don't fear what man can do. What can he do? Hebrews 13:5 and 6 in the New Testament echoes this sentiment. It says, God will never leave us. He will never forsake us. Therefore we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper. I will not fear what man shall do unto me. What can they do? Nothing. Nothing. Words of slander. Words of arrogance. What is that? I will not fear. Because he trusted in his God. Psalm 62:8. Trust in him at all times. Now here's the key. All times of your life. Good times, wonderful times, horrible times. Inexplicable times. Times when we're afraid. Times when we don't know what to do. Times when we're filled with anxiety. Trust in him at all times. Do you see the kind of man that David, he wrote each one of these words. They came right. This shows us a picture of this man's heart. What a beautiful heart he had. I wish I had a heart more like David. And I wish I trusted God more like David. I have to admit to you, I've not always trusted in God when things didn't go like I thought they should go. I've not always trusted in him like I should. But I should have. And that's my desire for the future. That's the desire for my life. As long or as short as it may be. May it be a life of trust in God. Do you trust in him? If you trust in him, obey his gospel and do it now while we stand and while we sing.